Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Vanessa Moreno, and in today's video we're diving into power training, plyometrics, and speed, agility, and quickness. Full disclosure, I am a mom of two, so if you hear a bit of background commentary, it's likely coming from my tiny co-host. So let's dive in. So this chapter focuses on the most important neuromuscular function in many sport performances, the ability to generate maximal muscular power, development, and program design will be addressed. This also includes advanced strength and conditioning techniques for developing power output. Welcome to part 2, SAQs and plyometrics, and the application of these. So we'll discuss what is speed, the neural systems that influence it, understand how the stretch shortening cycle contributes towards it, the critical variables to help improve plyometrics and SAQs towards programming, and some drills. What is speed? How do you get from point A to point B as quickly as possible? There are 3 things to consider: the neurological, biomechanics, and training. In order to execute movement techniques, athletes must apply a given force quickly. So this is again our mass and acceleration. Sport happens so rapidly that we have a limited time to apply this force. There are 2 variables that describe this force relationship to produce force during athletic activities. 1, rate of force development, known as RFD, and 2, impulse. So RFD is the development of maximal force in the minimal amount of time, typically used as an index of explosive strength. Impulse is the product of generated force and the time required for its production, which is measured as the area under the force time curve. The neural systems are critical for sprint performance because the activity and the interaction of the central nervous system with the peripheral nervous system ultimately influence the rate and strength of muscle contractions, which tie into the amount of action potentials being sent, the recruitment of our fiber types, the rate coding, the neural training. Research has shown that combination of strength, plyometrics, and sprint training produce several adaptations within the neuromuscular system that contribute to positive adaptations. So when we have an increase in the neural drive, which is indicative of an increase in rate at which the action potentials occur, those directly influence the ability to recruit higher order fibers, increase the rate of force production, and the speed at which recruitment occurs at. So that increased excitability ultimately enhances neural drive. The synchronization of the recruitment and the rate coding contribute to the increases in RFD and impulse generation. A quick review of fiber types. We have type 1 and type 2 fibers. Type 1 is highly oxidative, very aerobic endurance, low action potential thresholds, low intensity tasks, and smaller motor units as a whole. And they're typically expressed in endurance sports such as marathon runners. In comparison, we have type 2, which is highly anaerobic, also fast fatiguing, very low oxidative, high action potential thresholds, large motor units, and expressed in power and strength events such as sprinting. Speed requires the ability to accelerate and reach maximum velocity. In contrast, agility performance requires the use of perceptual cognitive ability in combination with the ability to accelerate negatively and then re-accelerate in an intended direction. Because of the nature of sports, there will be scenarios where the athlete must quickly adjust and change directions. However, they will be limited by their own physical capacity to do so during their activity. Thus, it is critical for us as strength and conditioning professionals to help develop their speed, change of direction, and agilities. Force represents the interaction of two physical objects, which is a vector quantity, which means it has both magnitude and direction. Traditionally, force is described as a push or a pull exerted upon one object by another, which prevent both occupying the same space. This movement causes acceleration. The starting position, the athlete should attempt to balance their body weight through a set position. This could be a 2 or 3 point stance that uses segmented angles critical for the production of force and power necessary to deliver that explosive force from the start. During the starting clearance, the initial steps of acceleration and recovery of the swing legs should be low to the ground to the point where the toes are barely off the ground. So this is both stride length and rate will increase during this time. The body moves from a 45-degree angle to more of an upright position as maximal velocity approaches. During maximal velocity, the sprinter displays stacked joints with the shoulders appearing to sit directly above the hips, which sit above the foot during the stance phase. The head continues to stay in a relaxed, neutral position with eyes focused directly forward. The shoulders should stay down and relaxed to allow arms to move at the same rate as legs cycle through the phases of the stance and swing. Technical guidelines and coaching focuses on the visual of the body position during braking and acceleration, leg action, arm action, ankle action, all to help facilitate the proper technique during the sprint, known as the 4 A's: ankle, action, arms, and angle, which will change dependent on which phase your athlete is in: acceleration, maximum velocity, or maintenance. Typically, boys and men exhibit greater absolute power than girls and women. However, program design should reflect developmental stages, training experience, and particular sport, rather than individual genders. Basic terminology of a jump, leap, hop, skip, throw, toss, and trunk exercises. When designing a program for plyometrics and SAQs, it is critical to remember that we must analyze the needs of the sport and the athlete, to know their training status, the requirements that are unique to that individual, and how to optimally prepare their program effectively. For example, if an athlete is landing in an extended state at the knees or at the hips and ankles, we want to make sure to instruct our athletes to land with a greater hip, knee, and ankle flexion, which allow the landing forces to be significantly reduced. Acute training variables for plyometrics. Frequency. With resistance training, frequency is simply the time between each training session. Plyometrics can be applied 1 to 3 days per week, depending on the sport and the athlete's experience, with typically 24 to 48 hours of rest between each session. For example, in season, you may have one session. However, during general preparation, you may increase this to 2 to 3 days per week. Total body sessions should have a minimum of 48 hours between each time. Intensity. The intensity of plyometrics is the amount of stress that is actually placed on the muscles being used and the connective tissues and the joints that are primarily being utilized during the specific drills. The intensity can range from low intensity to very high, which is 100% effort, or this can be an external load. For example, marching in place for a short distance, such as in a warm-up, is relatively low intensity, yet this can be done at 100% effort. In comparison, depth jumps to a rebound with the goal to reduce amortization phase with an external load can place higher stress on the neuromuscular system. The rule of thumb, as intensity increases, volume should decrease. This applies to plyometrics as well. Volume. Like resistance training, the volume in plyometrics is expressed as a number of repetitions and sets given during a program session. Appropriate plyometric volumes are going to differ based on the training age of the individual. For example, the novice individual who has zero experience training volume will drastically differ from an experienced athlete. Programs should always progress each exercise from a low to a moderate intensity and then progress over time with learned proper technique of movement, decreasing the total number of repetitions as intensity level increases. Progression from low to high may depend on the season the athlete is in. Low intensity may consist of performing exercises at 40 to 50% of maximal exertion, moderate intensity from 50 to 80, and high intensity from 80 to 100%. Rest in between repetitions may be 5 to 10 seconds and 2 to 3 minutes between actual sets. When focusing on improving power, peak velocity during the concentric phase appears to be the key component for counter movement jump performance, which directly goes hand in hand with our stress shortening cycle. An eccentric muscle action immediately followed by the concentric muscle action. Research has shown that improvements of 12.7% in takeoff velocity account for 71% of the observed improvement in jump performance. Agility is an efficient, coordinated movement in multiple planes performed at multiple velocities for optimal change of direction. Methods of developing speed. While there isn't a magic formula for developing or increasing maximum running speed, there are some specific guidelines that anyone can follow when training for speed improvement. Simply put, running brief and intense sprints with plenty of rest between repetitions is critical. Sound programming emphasizes technique, start, acceleration, ESD, and relaxation. 1, the body should be fully recovered, meaning the athlete should not be sore or overtrained because the improvements cannot improve their speed capabilities. Therefore, speed training is most effective at the beginning of a workout session. Proper sprint techniques. This must be taught and mastered by the athlete through the execution of many drills and repetitions over a long period of time. Speed does not come after a single session or a single week of drills. It is a derivative of multiple sessions, cycles of hard work, and hundreds of drill executions, focusing on the 4 A's. 3, appropriate work to rest ratios. As mentioned earlier, as intensity increases, our volume must decrease, but that also means if intensity increases, our rest must increase. So if we are using the ATP PCR system exclusively for our sprints, for example, 6 to 8 seconds, that means we need to increase our rest for 1 to 4 minutes. This will be a good amount of time or good estimate to allow our central nervous system and ATP to recover. 4, intensity and volume should vary, meaning we should have light, medium, and heavy days. Back-to-back hard days would not necessarily be beneficial to enhance speed. This actually may inhibit adequate recovery and delay adaptations. 5, track the distance your athlete runs. You want to be able to determine the amount of volume your athlete has ran for a given week. 6, you want your athlete to learn to run in a relaxed state. This is important for maximum speed. In order to run in a relaxed manner, while at the same time producing maximal effort. efficiency. This isn't something that comes overnight. Overexertion will produce extraneous body movements, which exerts more energy and detracts from the power required to go quickly. 7, in order to enhance speed, we must focus on energy system development. Focusing on 20 to 65 yards with short rest intervals is a good choice for sport-specific application. And lastly, all speed work must be preceded by a dynamic warm-up, which prepares the athlete for maximum efforts. A flexibility routine should be included at the end of the workout. Improving athleticism. The primary effect of agility training is increased body control and awareness. Controlling small motor transitions in the neck, the shoulder, the back, hips, knees, and ankles to achieve the best overall alignment. So in this respect, agility training can also prove crucial to building confidence for athletes who are frustrated with their performance, in particular for those who have little coordination. So when designing an agility program to enhance these components, we need to focus on strength, power, acceleration, negative acceleration, commonly known as deceleration, coordination, and balance. So within strength refers to maximal force that a muscle or muscle groups can generate. Research has demonstrated that there's a very strong correlation between lower body strength and agility. Therefore, we should place emphasis on strength as a foundation in order to develop agility. Power, the king of all goals, may be considered the most important aspect of training. It refers to the rate at which work is done, also known as force times velocity. The faster the athlete gets from point A to point B, the greater the power. So it can be increased by improving speed. Acceleration is measured by the change in velocity per unit of time. It plays a central role from going from a stationary position to top speed, then quickly increasing speed again on making a directional change if needed. Having that ability to accelerate, negative accelerate, change directions, for example, in a running back, getting through a hole in the line or being tackled, is critical. Negative acceleration is the ability to decrease speed or come to a stop from a maximal or near maximal speed. It is key to slowing the body down to a speed at which one can change directions quickly and then re-accelerate safely. It can place a good deal of stress on the joints and is a main source of injury among athletes. Thus, it is critical to program how to negatively accelerate. Coordination. Coordination involves the ability to control and process multiple muscle movements in order to effectively perform athletic skill. Nearly all human movement occur through multiple joints and muscles working in a coordinated fashion in order to accomplish a given task. Therefore, we must mimic the movements done on the field, in the weight room, and during training. Dynamic balance is the ability to maintain control over the body while in motion. Through these perturbations that we have by the nervous system, we can adjust our center of gravity and therefore readjust our position as needed to prevent a fall. Training variables are also applied to agility. The training factors such as the medical history, the needs analysis, the training age, the experience, and their current status are critical to understanding where to start within an agility program. The sequence of drills are highly technical and may require high power output, or are most similar to the demands of the sport played by the athletes, should be done first. FIVR, frequency, intensity, volume, and rest. Similar to other programs, as intensity increases, volume should decrease. So intensity, the speed at which the drill is performed. If the drill is timed, the intensity can be measured by the distance covered. Volume, the quantity of exercise performed per workout. For example, an athlete may perform 4 drills on an agility ladder by doing each drill twice. Sets and reps, similar to other training programs, a group of agility drills and relief of rest periods in between. Frequency, the number of training sessions performed in a given week. So athletes should perform agility training workouts at least 2 times per week during the off season, which is general prep, specific prep, and once during the season. And again, the selection of exercise should be based on the movement pattern of the sport, the time and distance prescribed during the work interval, how long the sequence rest intervals are, which are or will vary according to the training objectives and the drill complexity. Methods of developing quickness. Training for quickness involves the correct body position, body angle, plant foot position, control of balance, and center of mass. Coaches who can emphasize improving their athlete's ability to stop with good body position and control decrease the time it takes for them to begin accelerating. That is the amortization phase, being quick, and then immediately accelerate. By making an athlete conscious of successful movement strategies over time and through numerous successful attempts, the athlete will then begin to feel these movement patterns become more unconscious or second nature-like. Once an athlete masters basic patterns, the coach can then focus on true nature of sport-specific quickness, which involves the athletic performing skills with multiple or chaotic stimuli intended to increase reactive demands, such as stimulus choice or anticipatory responses. When training for quickness, keep in mind that the movement athletes perform when doing drills should always progress from slow to fast, simple to complex, active to reactive, predictable to unpredictable, and low level to high level plyometrics. Methods of developing quickness. The mental processing speed is composed of 3 different stages: sensation, perception, and response selection. Within that is reaction time. So the length of time it takes to initiate a movement. So the total response time accounts for the mental processing and the time it takes to complete a specific task. So for example, during volleyball, a serve is initiated and receives it puts sensation time into a practical context. So during a serve, all 6 athletes on the receiving team must prepare to receive that ball. Each athlete must detect not only if the ball is coming towards them, but at what speed and with what characteristics. This goes towards the color and borders of the direction, velocity, and disposition. Discerning these initial stimuli in the sensation stage begin to give meaning to the situation presented to the athlete, and then begins the second stage of mental processing speed, perception. So perception, with continuing along with the volleyball serve example, the 6 athletes then combine the visuals that has begun to give meaning with the audible cues given by the defense specialist to detect the serve as a deep right corner floater. Note that audible cues register faster than the visual stimuli. So at this point, each athlete must decide if a response is necessary. The information gathered in the perception stage is then passed on to the third stage of mental processing speed response selection. So the last step of this is the response selection. So as a result, during the response selection stage, the athlete decides whether or not a response is necessary to address the stimuli. So all 6 players have detected that the serve is a deep right corner floater. So as a result, 5 players decide no response is necessary, while 1 player must respond in a manner that results in proper body position for a successful pass. The total time required to organize a response or the decision not to respond to the environment stimuli is called response selection time. For the sake of simplicity, that the serve receive example described, the decision process involved is assessing whether or not to receive the serve. It does not consider off-ball movements that are required of the other 5 players on the court. When programming for quickness, the critical variables can reflect a traditional training for strength or power. Movements can be embedded within the program of a push-pull or a total body program. It can be done 3 to 5 times a week. Intensity and volume should be inversely related. And work to rest ratio will also be determined by the complexity of the skill or the exercise selected. Exercise selection should reflect and mimic movement of the sport and the specific position that the athlete plays, as well as the athlete's training age. Please see reading resources for quickness examples.